the Entente continues their falling back in the face of, the advance of the First and Second Army. There's just not enough meat on that army, on the Belgians and the BEF, to hold the line against this stuff. But I am delaying things tremendously, largely because the Germans didn't take an aggressive enough stance to begin with. But the effect of that is it's thinning the Fifth Army out. And to some extent, I think we're shifting. To one thing, we're shifting territory. The Fourth Army is taking more territory on with the same amount of forces and getting thinned out. My hope had been to try to push units down the pipeline and get stuff over there to thicken that line a little bit. But man, it's hard. It's hard when you're looking at, I've been getting hit pretty damn hard down here, and I got to swap units in and out and everything. And I really can't afford to just pull something completely out of a sector to go, especially to defend what's a thinning line that just hasn't been hit at all. But my feeling is, now there's places where there's some iffiness, but my feeling is that, this general thinning of the French line means that it's all just going to collapse and the Germans are going to come storming through. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. That's just not the way the game kind of works. Units degrade more slowly than that. The fact that you have a 4-to-1 odds or whatever doesn't mean that you can punch a hole through the enemy line. What it means is you grind them down a little faster. You have more of an advantage in terms of the combat chart. And that generally doesn't mean that you send them flying back. However, if we start seeing some intense attacks in this area or something, I don't know, maybe we'll see the line break worse. Using some of my new fortifications to strengthen the center a little bit, where, I've been given a respite, but, it's been a quiet sector overall, but I do expect that they'll eventually attack. And because I don't have to move around and shift units much, it means that I have the movement points to dig in. There has been some attacking. You can see there's a few units recovering over here. Also, the French are deciding, even though there's an ammo shortage on this front, we're going to try to break the line here at Colmar. Not so much with some idea of cracking that Swiss connection, although it will make life a lot harder if the mountain passes start falling into French hands. It kind of makes life harder on both sides, though. So it's not this wonderful guarantee. But also to just put some pressure on the back end here, so that maybe it pulls some units away from the Sixth Army into play. And the thing is, with the transfer of the Seventh Army up here, Strasbourg, there's not a lot of extra play. The extra play was really in giving, more territory over to the Sixth Army. I got a slot for one more corps, but I don't have room for both the corps. Of course, one of the corps probably would have to go help defend. And, we'll see. Loosening the pressure here might mean less pressure here, or making the strike here might mean less pressure here, which means that I can start transferring those units up. I don't know. But now it is time for the counter move. And for an off-turn set of attacks, things didn't go badly at all for the Germans. Some firepower here. I threw everything in, even the 42-inch gun or whatever. Knocked down about half the fortress. That means maybe I want to launch an assault next turn, or during the German side of the player turn, and in conjunction with the fire, maybe even throw in one of my very, very limited prep bomb attacks. Probably don't really need to. Also here, since the French gave up the escarpment, and I didn't really realize how defensive a position the escarpment is. It halves the attacker's value, which is pretty damn potent, to tell you the truth. But I just didn't have the troops to hold in front of the fortresses there. We managed to push into a rather weak fortress, and now we can start trying to reduce that. We got to be careful to maintain some kind of connection back so we don't lose victory points come the interphase, which is some time off still. We just started this turn. But also, I also just have to be careful that, the French can't make some sort of counterattack and throw my position into question. Because right now I'm sitting on something that's kind of important, which is to degrade that fort. Once I do that, then, I can swing against other things, although this is part of Verdun here, so it's pretty damn potent. I'm going to need the cannons to take that out, probably. But yeah, there's no entrenchment over here. There's just the raw fort, and I took that. Took the hex. None of the fortresses have fallen this time. Put pressure here. That was actually really, really effective. Attritional type stuff, CEL losses and whatever. But what's nice about it is now I get to throw my prepared attacks that'll be slightly better, perhaps, almost certainly, at already weakened units, and they're pinned in place at that point. And there's really nothing that can be thrown up to them. So I'm looking at the possibility of a breach here. Over here, we didn't do too badly against the Brits. We actually pushed them forward. Now, we're getting our line weakened, but I don't see much opportunity for a serious counterattack down there. The Brits could throw something against these weaker units here. Obviously, this is meat, but this cav unit or something, and maybe force it back. So what? Then I'm out of position, or maybe beat it up. So what? It's a unit that generally I'm keeping in the backfields to protect stuff. It's not an LOC unit. I don't have to. But those cav units aren't really the spearhead of my assault. So there's not much value to the Brits trying to take advantage of what looks like a gap here. They're not trying to advance. They have no hopes of doing so. So it just becomes this constant falling back. And that's starting to get to an expensive point because I'm stretching this, but even if I pull back, further and further, I don't know where, at some point or another, I'm linked to the Verdun line here. If I create a gap here, that's horrible. So I've got to protect this, and as things get more and more deformed, it becomes harder and harder to hold anything like a line. Now, historically, that failure happened early, right? Because the Germans rush in. But here, I'm pummeling this thing enough that it just can't hold forever. And I think I'm going to get a lot of these victory point hexes, even though I've held off that attack. Again, that feels a little weird. I may not advance as far as historical, but may end up in a better victory point position in the game because of it. I'm not sure. And some of that has to do with not penalizing for not reaching column 45 at all. Something I've griped about ad infinitum. So, and we'll swap over to the Germans. Now at this point, we're seeing the German implications of the surrender of Antwerp, which basically means this is going to go away, and God knows what. A bunch of units come off the map. Some of them get changed into different units. Okay, some weirdnesses in terms of substitutions and reinforcements. This is the turn that the Belgian army group disappears because it's 3 turns after Antwerp fell. First of all, one of the units that was supposed to come in as a replacement is replacing a unit from next turn. Okay, easy enough. I'll take care of that next turn. If I remember. Otherwise, things will get really confusing. But the other side of it is that there's a requirement that you remove a Landwehr brigade that was attached to the Army Group Belgian. Well, there was nothing in Army Group Belgian anymore. You might be able to argue there were a couple of LOC regiments that were attached. Unlike with the victory conditions, where, I'm not sure what the hell to do because I hadn't reached column 45 yet, it seems reasonable to me to remove a nearby Landwehr unit from the 1st Army, so I did that. No biggie there. Fairly large pile of substitutions, though, and the burden of these non-combined units is slowly beginning to grow. I just got one where it combines this and this. Well, sure, I could get them close together soon, but I sure the hell don't want to combine them. I need those units to hold my line down there, and they're not in, there's not room to create another unit. Yes, I could spread out and create a 2-hex unit out of it or something, but I'm just not interested in it. Now, the other one that I have for the Germans, this 1st Cav, I do want to create. I'm waiting for this fortress to fall so I can do it, because this is a shitty Cav that I would enjoy folding in. What I don't want to do is fold another decent Cav in with the guard Cav, if there is one kicking around, I don't know. See, I mean, these are a little bit better, and I'd rather not waste them on it. And also, I kind of want them where they are, and I don't want to send them off to create that bigger Cav unit. So, it's just like... And then the French one, I believe, also was a situation where I can't afford to put the units together. I think it's these two, which I'm actually considering, and I started heading it down there because it'll help on the offensive against Strasbourg. I also got an additional Strasbourg depot, which I guess I'll flip this way because... I guess the entire army can only serve 8 ammo. I'm not sure. This is going to be problematic because I'm using some of it to spear attacks here. Of course, right now I'm trying to recharge those units. A big push this turn by the Germans. New 7th Army smashing into the Belgians up here. 1st Army much, much smaller, but still continuing its push just all the way down to the 4th, really. Then a bit of a skip here, but then, yeah, we're even continuing, even into the 6th Army, where we're getting kind of tired. We had to pull some units off the line. But, just continuing that pressure as much as possible. See if we can dislodge some stuff, because it's just not going to do for us to allow, all these entrenchments to take place. Well, they're going to take place, but yeah. As good a turn for the Germans as they would have hoped for. Attacks down here were painful. Used up a lot of ammo, busted the forts up, but they're going to get repaired because they weren't taken. No forts fell, although I did capture this space. So, I'm beginning to make inroads here, and crossing the river line was completed here. That's not necessarily that big a deal. I've got to clear the rails here to be able to have any kind of real supply running into the 3rd Army down there. And I may have to swing the 3rd Army. Oh, I don't know. I mean, it may have to go all the way around here. So this may be a significant delay to get the 3rd Army depot across the river there. Not much of value happened. The Brits got pushed back, but the Belgians did not, which seems a little strange. They were weak, they were getting hit hard, but they held up even though somewhat damaged. And the other thing of interest was I noticed this. Apparently I'm going to get the Met's army here, I think, which will give me another group, which will be helpful because that's not here. That's back here. That'll help me, coordinate a defensive line along there, I guess. I'm a little crowded. I got to pull some stuff out of the 6th Army into that Metz garrison force, whatever. And that's like the Strasbourg force. It's just something, that says, this is an area where we're not really focusing that hard. Although I have been, I'm breached the line here, and I'm not convinced that that's, an effort not worth continuing, even though I don't have a lot of troops, by thinning the French line. The other thing, though, was here, the Réseau du Nord. What that is these trigger spaces that I haven't reached yet. I think they're basically no longer of any importance. They fuck up the railways because the French are blowing all the railroads back there, and make it possible for, honestly, the BEF and the Belgians to run into a problem where they have to fall back further. Well, that's not the case anymore. Those can come directly, back into control now. At least that's the way I read this. Let's take a look at it. And this is, again, because I'm going so painfully. But prior to game turn 10, clearing the rail lines in the eastern area is triggered. Clearing the western area is triggered by this. The player turn after being triggered, all French control rail lines east become non-operational. All remaining French control railways in the region become non-operational. But the return to use is game turn 14, which is now. They're going to be there. So I will guess that whatever kind of hindrance was there for the Allies, really, is not going to be the case anymore. And I can probably ignore those counters, but we'll leave them there to make sure that I do cover them correctly. 1831, 2311. Yeah. What's up with this? This is okay. Those might be in play. Those become bottlenecks that get deployed as you lose rail net. But not gaining all that much. If we look here, we're at 3820, which, yes, we just finished the first turn of the interface, but we're still not doing very well there. This is not far enough. Is it? Yeah, it is. Yeah, so down here we're looking at 4330. So that's like 13 points. Here, 45. 35 is 10 points. So we're looking at a loss of 10 points max, probably, at this point. Unless we may well gain more territory. I don't think we're going to get flung back from that position. This looks like the French line is disintegrating in the 4th Army sector, which is not a good thing for them at all. And I don't know how to pull together a defense. But on the other hand, if the historical option happened, the defense is just blown in the north, right, completely. Whereas here, I can give up ground more slowly. So, I don't know. They started moving the Entente forces. And again, you know, try not to lose too much ground here, but I got a problem where I got to link up and there's holes in, you know, I need to recover units and I need them to be in the backfields where they can recover, and that means I will be further weakening my units. Anyway, as I'm doing that, I decide, hey, I want to look up those territorial units under the GDT because something seems weird. You know, I noticed they're upgradable, and I'm not sure when they upgrade. So I wanted to make sure that they're not supposed to be upgraded as ours. I also found that I had brought my British unit in by rail a turn early, so it is back to being entrained and coming in case you were wondering, hey, why is that still under an entrained marker, assuming you could, you know, see that amongst the chaos of the whole situation. However, what I did run across was, no, the GDT actually doesn't go away when I made it go away. What I had here was a train GDT, but later on turn 18 is when the train GDT goes away and the GDT stops existing, I think. And I don't know what the fuck the train is for and whether, I mean, it didn't have a depot, I think, so I don't know. I really don't know how the fuck it's supposed to operate. But we have special rules on the GDT here. These rules expire on turn 18. Prior to 18, it cannot be attached to an army. It has its own organizational display. This is not a big deal. I can fix this. They begin the game with detachment markers. We dealt with that. On turn 18, this all happens, and the GDT attachment markers are flipped to their backside, and you remove the core attachment marker and train unit from play. Now, this doesn't make sense. And here's why. And maybe it's in the errata or whatever. I think I'm doing it right because there's no reason for there to be a core attachment marker if the GDT exists as this cannot be attached to an army, because that thing doesn't hold core. Trying to paw through one-handed. And maybe it's in the French pile or whatever. So much shit. It's not any of those. It's not that. Yeah, I don't know where the fuck it went. I had a card for it, right? I swear I did. Anyway, that doesn't exist anymore. Whatever that, I can't even fucking find the card for it anymore. According to these rules, that's supposed to go away. And let me see if I can fucking find it. It is. And it made sense while this, this is on the board. There's no GDT train. There's no marker that attaches it to anything. That all makes sense. Then a train and the attachment marker, presumably, it doesn't tell you to bring attachment markers in, but they come in when the train comes in, for most units, come into play. Great. What does that mean? Well, I mean, I'm using it as an attached unit in the 5th Army and ignoring this rule, because that's what I started doing. And I think it's what is intended by the pieces. And it works, This thing becomes part of the army. But I think the whole core gets dissolved as the next step. And again, there's just no way to reconcile why there's an attachment marker if it can't be attached to any armies. French army, again, I feel like it's stretched to almost collapse, and I just keep spreading it thinner and thinner, the breakthrough here, trying to cover that patch. And, I have to do that because the Verdun connection, right? I lose that, and I start losing victory points every interphase. Not a lot, but it depends on how bad the hull gets. This is not where you want. You do not want any break south of where your requirement is, because if anything can be exploited, it's going to be problematic. I still have this ugly bulge, which is eating up a lot of my units. I'm trying to shift some of them, northward along the line, but it's a hard job to do because this feels like it can barely hold the line. However, it's like double thickness compared to what I have in the northern sectors. So probably shouldn't be holding so many units there. But if I weaken it, I think the Germans will be able to punch through pretty hard. And while I'm at this, because the Germans are a little weak down there, one of the things I'm doing is I'm fighting my way towards Strasbourg. But I think I can withdraw this plan if I so desire. But I think I'm going to try to take this space back, because the Germans have weakened their position there significantly. And again, if I can make up for whatever weakness is going on in the center by forcing the Germans to put more reserves into 6th Army, into Strasbourg, that's one way of healing the problem, I guess. I think that's it for tonight. I am fatigued as hell. So I'll be looking at the counter move either if I wake up in the middle of the night or early in the morning, probably. After the German move, the French launched their couple of attacks. This one to very little effect. This one, we had a casualty. Both sides took an S strength point effect, which is really kind of a bonus for the French. That's about all that happened there. No morale impact anywhere across the board on any of these. But the strength reductions is a big deal. That's putting more and more force on here. The Germans are sending another unit over. That may free up this ersatz division here, or something. Maybe this, I don't know, instead to try to plug the gap with, because we really don't have anything left beyond this was one of the Strasbourg garrison units turns into something else through the replacement process. Fairly easy one to find. Now, the reason I'm taking a pause here is, one, because the French were doing attacks, which hasn't been very usual. I looked over the line, like the Brits, they don't want to make this attack. First of all, they've got a cav division involved. It ends up being, it looks like, I've got 3 hexes against 1, but I don't really. I've got the equivalent of 2 hexes against 1 across the river. I've got damaged units over on the BEF side. It's just not worth it. And similarly, everywhere that I look where I have, a numerical advantage in terms of number of hexes, it's just not a good attack. On the other hand, you can see the Germans are pressing hard, pretty much down the line until we get into the 6th Army area. German attacks were relatively effective. A couple of them were just bombardments. One took down the fortress, preparing us for another assault. The other one, not so much. Now, I did spend some 30.5 ammo on this, and we're getting kind of low on that. Our good ammo, we don't have such a limited number of shots. The 21 centimeter, we have a lot, but it doesn't do much except against the shitty forts like around Antwerp. No fortresses were taken, but we got the advance here. We didn't get terrible results along here or up here. We didn't dislodge this. We came damn close. Over here, the Brits were pushed back pretty hard, actually, and the Belgians took hits. That whole northern sector is still going to have to keep falling back. That is pretty damn obvious. And, I mean, that just keeps stretching the line further and further. I can't open up a hole, I could stagger my units perhaps for a little bit better defense, the way I had to do in the Serbian game. So far here, I've had so many units, but there's a danger in doing those kinds of things. There really is. Because you have the flexibility in this game of throwing 2 corps into a given attack instead of just 1, it means that I can get, in general, 6 divisions into an attack, which means if I start leaving corners open and stuff, there's more possibility of a problem opening up. Now, where the Germans are having trouble, here I could have thrown 6 divisions in. It's a corner, right? Where the Germans start having trouble, it becomes, getting the troops together for it, it becomes a less of a big deal. But if they have the quantity of troops to be able to mass them, that could actually open up gaps in a way that I'm not sure I really want to. Anyway, we go on to the German side of the turn, and that's it for this morning, I believe. The Germans, once again, launching a massive set of attacks, just all down the line, really. Focusing in the north, but a lot in the center, too, and trying to reduce fortresses Nancy and Toul. One of the things I've had to do, though, is I had to decide I've committed too much over here already. I'm just entrenching the shit out of that southern area. Maybe too late. I may end up with a breakthrough down here, and that could cause some serious problems for me. But entrenching here will allow me to shift some forces down to Strasbourg, help defend it, help me shift forces into the new Metz region and towards the 5th Army, where there's real holes. I mean, look at this gap here. Now, there's some garrison up there, and zones protecting everything, so it's not like the French can just run in and do a lot of damage. But it's getting close, especially if we just keep punching up this way. If the French line won't give, but it'll bend and leave bulges in it, I have to do something about that. And honestly, there's not that much for me to gain here. I have to be cutting to wire. 45 is my line, so that's like here. If this hasn't collapsed yet, look at all the French in it. It's not going to just fall apart. Let's just dig in and call it, call it a failed attempt, because we've put way too much effort into that. Now, the troops start down there, You really kind of have to do something to get them into other regions of the board. And they, I had that initial goal of those Lorraine unit spaces or whatever that I wanted to grab at 3 points each, but it's just not worth pursuing any longer. If I'm not gonna, if I'm gonna breach it, I'm gonna breach it here, and I'm gonna threaten it all, and then, that's where the French have to make their decision as to whether they want to hold this bulge or fall back to the fort if I end up cracking the line somewhere down here in sort of the center of the front. Well, some of my intuitions were correct. The Allied lines were not in good shape. Not only in the north here, where we punched a hole, nothing happened here. We failed. This was actually potentially very painful. We barely failed to take the fortress down with the bombardments, which meant we ended up making a prepared attack. I could have thrown one more 30.5 in, but I'm worried about my ammo, man. There's a lot of fortresses left on the board, including Paris. I need artillery to be able to deal with some of these. And, so I made a judgment that I had a pretty good attack, a pretty likely chance of taking it down. It didn't happen. But I did make, let's see, breakthrough there. I think this was a breakthrough. And no gap open, but, pushed them back, and now the French line is more deformed. We probably need to fall back again just to conserve pieces, really, more than anything else. And that's not a bad thing. That'll help us catch up to this if we fall back. This is not, well, see, part of the problem is we have some defensive emplacements. Not here. So, what do you do when your entrenchments are breached? Do you let the enemy create that deformation? These entrenchments aren't that powerful. I would say no. I would say tightening the line is probably the more important thing. We did actually gain this hex. However, with all these fortresses, and I rolled a second time for this because I think I've been forgetting it. With all these fortresses we're sitting on, one down here, two, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think that's it. We're just not getting any turnaround on them. We did destroy something, an asset, I think, which I believe can be destroyed. I don't know. Anyway, that was a victory point. I'm not going to worry about it under the Serbian game. I know it could have been, but I may be misplaying that. But it was a weak unit. If it wasn't destroyed, it would have been a replacement point taken back. Yeah, let me look it up. And, plugging our way forward very slowly, very slowly. This is not the lightning advance. We won it, right? That's my fault, but it does seem to me to be showing something. I don't know what exactly. I really don't know what. I would guess this looks like our about 10 points off. Yeah, about 10 points off on either of those. They're on a diagonal, so, or not quite on a diagonal, which is why I'm kind of confused. So this is 42. 42 to 32 is 10 points. This is 45 to 35 is 10 points. I don't know. I would think that they'd be on a diagonal if it was, but. Oh. And this is 44 to 34. We're just not quite hitting it. Not quite getting any better. So we're going to take a 10-point hit if we don't make some ground up. Unless there's no way there's anything up here, This is like 39 to or 38 to 20, so we're looking at a 20-point hit there. So yeah, this is our best advance so far, and I mean, it looks like I'm breaking a hole through the Fourth Army there. I don't know what to do about it. It's like there just aren't resources. This is the only place where I have an excess of force. And both sides have. I did one of my depressing chat videos today, and one of the sad things about it is I just never managed to get to what I think kind of needed to be said. And I manage it in the comments, which is that there's this real difference between the two forms of misery or pain that I suffer. And honestly, the one from my wife's death is more manageable. It's just pain. It's an emotion response. The other form of misery, which I also call pain, but it's this nerve-wracking inability to do the things that need to be done, and that is always with me. That one is always with me. The other one, those are just emotional pains that I've accumulated. Yes, they're always available, and maybe it won't fade as fast as others did, which, we're talking a decade maybe. But shit. Anyway, I don't know. Part of the line, other than an attack we're making here against Kalmar, again, is trying to degrade this position, force them out somehow, and cause something to change. We're playing this weird little dance, units hopping out of the line to recover, other units that have recovered pulling back in. Although we are stripping the First Army, these units are recovering right now, but the intention is to send them up to a more needed front. The same way the Germans are honestly stripping the Sixth Army. They're entrenching so that they can do that. And I think we've kind of come to the agreement of it doesn't make a lot of sense for either of us to be fighting here. When there are other sectors of the front that are in much more danger, and in particular for that, I'm kind of impressed with the fact that I'm able to maintain a line, but as soon as this falls, or actually is adjacent, a German unit comes adjacent to it, as soon as that happens, it triggers a second withdrawal of the Belgians. One which essentially lasts for the entire game. I mean, they go through the whole base change thing, but basically the effect of it is that they're down to 4 ammo supply per turn, and I just screwed up. These should not be expended. Those were expended back in the French turn, and not in the German turn. So yeah, I mean, I've got plenty of ammo. I'd actually had it screwed up, I think, in terms of numbers, and I'd spent 1 too little, which I had corrected. We're getting to the point where I may have to make sure units or markers at least are in the right place in kind of the backfields, because as I move these things across the board, especially where I have all these discs and everything, they're going to dislodge stuff. I'm trying to keep them off real units, but that's complicated. Unfortunately, I felt like I was ready to go to sleep, but somebody responded in a really acerbic fashion to, yes, my admittedly whiny video, but I gotta tell you, I need to be able to speak to someone. And speaking to the camera is the only time that I have something that's kind of close to talking to another human. It really isn't, but it's definitely different from speaking, at least sober. When drunk, I probably talk to people, but I know I do, but I'm not the kind of person who's gonna, go and get drugs for my depression, and I'm also, I've tried the rapist and or the rapists, and it doesn't do shit for me, and you're paying money to do something that really is no better than the camera. And honestly, whatever I did by speaking it aloud the way I did, maybe it's because I always lie to the camera, like I say, I'm not going to come up for another turn or whatever, and then I do. It's the same kind of thing. When I vocalize what the issue is in this particular manner, it actually makes it easier, and it maybe makes it easier than it does with a real human. But anyway, I tried to do something. I failed, of course, but it got one of the hitches out of the way. So now I can start dealing with the next must do before all other things problem in my life. So the one French attack didn't really go anywhere. It didn't do anything good for the French. Nothing too terrible, but step losses, which is a good thing because the French do want to cause casualties. They've got a better reserve of replacement points. Up here, everywhere else pretty much it was just the Germans doing, again, broad-based attacks up and down the line. Some gains made over here, not necessarily that great, but you can see the Brits have been punched back. They had to leave a disordered unit on the line. That may have been just an error on my part. I'm not sure. I was a little surprised to find one of them there. I think what happened was I needed it to fill in the gaps, but I didn't really. I could have spread the 5th a little bit more than I did. That's the kind of thing that I view as, those are the kind of errors that like feel like there's a story behind them that you can kind of facilitate in your own mind and look at and see, you know, they didn't get the orders in time, whatever, they were requesting the right to be relieved, and then they just got slammed in the midst of that or whatever. Elsewhere you can see the German line looks actually really weak. It's sparse. This is the way you attack. You want to launch stronger attacks against weaker points on the line. Defending that way doesn't work. You can't defend with like every other hex or anything like that in this game very easily. What you can do, it works a little better in the Serbian game, but what you can do is these little step levels, like 3 units in a row, and then a space, and then a couple units or 3 units in a row. That seems to have a little bit more stability. If you do it just the every other hex type stuff, what you end up having is gaps getting blown in the line very easily. In fact, we had gaps blown in the line anyhow, somewhere. I think the French line is contiguous still, but it may not be after the German move, because we've got this line here. The German line is not contiguous, but they've got to turn to scramble and get back to it. What that's going to mean is there's going to be this kind of obnoxious in and out dance going on, where early in the sequence of the interphase, you know, for what is it? It's like about a week total. So for the first 4 days of every given week or whatever, attacks are strong, and then everybody falls back and makes up their line in the southern region again. It just feels goofy. If I get a numerical advantage, I can launch attacks and keep my line together and keep pushing attacks and maybe get a breach that'll cost a couple of victory points to the French. We had no fortresses fell still, and we've got this sort of steady stream on both sides trying to trickle its way into the center of the line and strengthen that. And, you know, to some extent, whoever wins that race has an advantage in terms of being able to maybe get a few hexes or something, which could be important if it ends up outflanking one of the fortresses. The Germans have the advantage in this race because they've got the interior lines. All right, we'll go on to the German turn, but that's it for the morning. So this is turn 15 still, German side. They're continuing a pretty massive attack in the central and north areas, except for the 4th Army. The 4th Army is a bit battered, and I pulled everything back, and I'm recovering. Okay. However, to make that contiguous line, I didn't have enough. I could have, given that I'm not launching an attack here at Nancy, but I left the units there, and I probably wanted to here, so I could have created a stronger line than I have. But what I've done is I've spread out and created quite a weak line. In fact, 2 hex units here with just brigades holding a lot of territory. And with fairly weak units in the front here. And this opens up an interesting opportunity for the French. They could come surging out and try to threaten, these forces that are out here that are kind of extended a little too far. Similarly, I could do something like that here. Oh boy, that's the kind of risky thing that I have real trouble trying to figure out what the impact would be, right? So if we think about that a little bit, I would probably be giving up my entrenchments, which are expensive. I might just fucking gain a complete, not destruction of the Germans, right? That's where my thinking though is I might manage to encircle things and make life really hard on the Germans and really kind of crush their whole offensive in the center. We're not talking about destroy their army probably, or almost definitely. But what are we talking about? Well, let's say I march forward into a space like this with 2 units in a reaction attack, because that's what we're thinking about right now is the reaction attack, not next turn, my first turn attack. So I could get up to a 5-to-1 targeted against individual units along this line, and also tighten my line. Okay. Some danger there though, because I got to maintain my connectivity here. Right? I can't thin things anymore to make some attack. Well, 5-to-1 just comes out to 4-to-1. It won't be a prepared attack. Oh, wait, it won't even be 5-to-1. It'll be 20-to-6, say. But here I could get 5-to-1 against the cav. I could pick on the calves. Okay, so say I get a 4-to-1. Well, a retreat is kind of what I need. I need to retreat this whole line. But the chances of what I'm going to get is maybe a 1-hex retreat on a couple of units on the line, and that could cause some real disruption and gain me some victory points. It's hard to read this. If I do an intensive attack, I can force the retreats more often at cost. But in terms of the morale check, well, let's take a look at what we're looking at here. So 7C is like a 10 with a +3, +4. Chances are I'm going to cause a 1 or 2 CE loss. And I have to, in order to get this to work, I basically have to roll a 1 through 3 on the black die, which isn't too hard. That'll get me my retreat probably. Although not if I roll a 5 or a 6 on the white die. And some of these units are shitty 4 quality units, which means I'll actually be rolling a +1 against the higher quality German units on the black die. Of course, if I pick on the stronger unit, I could have an advantage. Those are just Landwehr. What looks like an opportunity, I don't think actually is. Unless I can shift more forces over into that front, and I think I'm recuperating before I shift, I think it's too big a risk. Not sure though. This is the kind of thing where like familiarity with the design and how things play out has to be kind of hard won. If I don't take the chance, it's not going to I'm not going to learn, was it a bad idea or a good idea? It just becomes one of those missed opportunities, which my life itself is filled with. But with gaming, that too. I'm afraid to make this maneuver. Why? Well, because I've got the Germans kind of clogged here. I'm doing what I think is better than usual. But, if I end up doing something that breaks open the center, it's kind of game over for France, right? I'm gambling I think the whole game on trying to fling them back here, where I can probably hold them back. It's just time, time and slowly advancing, because the Germans do still have the numerical advantage. Although you can see a lot of French troops are coming in the long run. It's a hard call. I think I'm not gonna make it. Yeah, I think I'm gonna hold the defensive line. I don't think that I have a real opportunity. It's weird when your opponent offers you something like this. If I was playing an actual opposed game, the Germans might well make that offer. The French, if I was playing the French in the opposed game, I might take it. I think I'd be more likely than in a solo game. Why? I don't know. I really don't know. I think in part the fury at the enemy, dissing me that much. Over here, this is much weaker, but there ain't much for the French to play with. They don't have a lot of units to push this part back. I just think it's too risky, unless I can, I don't know. I mean, I've got a lot of units here on the in the French Third Army facing the German Fourth Army that could kind of shift things over. And I've got some extra units here maybe that could kind of shift things over. So maybe I make that decision as sort of the last decision, what the 6th and 9th Army are going to do, whether they're going to take that risk. Because the potential payoff, I think, is fairly high. I think I could shorten my line at the least, force this whole thing to fall back a little bit. I doubt that I can encircle these guys and cause a real problem. I think the Germans can fight their way out of the bag. I might be able to create a couple victory points by breaking up their contiguous line. But I am not going to do it if I can't mostly hold my contiguous line. Again, I might spend a victory point or two to cause this attack, but yeah. As the Entente starts to react, moving things around here, not a lot of falling back, honestly. And indeed, because the German attacks are so sparse, they're leaving hexes like this unpinned, which means I can shift in and better defend stuff. And this is against prepared attacks. So the Germans are going to pay an ugly price, I think, this turn, at least in some of their attacks. Over here, I think there was another one where they came down off the bend. And we're going to try to take advantage of those situations where possible. This we were counting on anyway, probably. Not really. I mean, I looked at the Germans and I'm like, oh, I got 2 units on 1, without really thinking too hard about what kind of reserves are going to be able to be thrown into play. And it really, here, this is a backline unit that, this is a backline unit that can be thrown, no, not this one, this one's adjacent. This is a backline unit that can be thrown in as a reserve. It's only a few strength points. It's about equivalent to, throwing a brigade or a regiment in. It really, the Cav suck. Cav divisions are shitty. Cav Corps can be kind of impressive, but when we're seeing a whole infantry division thrown in as an extra defense, that's a major slap in the Germans' plans. And in fact, why am I not throwing a GDT in there? That's a good question. We were coming from back here, probably 2, 3, 4, 5. That's why. Couldn't quite reach, but we could do this. 2, 3. Here we go. This guy comes 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's going to have to make a morale check to do that. But again, I think it's worth it to get that extra strength in there. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 means that I use 2 extra movement points. So it's +2 on my morale check. 8, I'm sure that succeeds in that. It's not a damaged unit. So that's the kind of thing. When you start leaving the enemy line capable of reacting. Now, I won't be able to do that so much here without expending victory points. And victory points seem to be pretty valuable. Like a point or two, it's kind of hard to get them back. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think we'll see much movement there, because that contiguous line, this is the special turn, right? This is the last couple days of the week. Friday and Saturday, if you don't have your buddies nearby, maybe it's Saturday and Sunday so that you can go to church or something. I have no idea. There's no reasonable way to argue for turns which have special condition like interphases that don't happen at the end of every turn. I really find that a problematic situation in a lot of games. We saw that when I was playing, there's one of them, the American Civil War, I don't know what it's called. It's like Civil War Campaign Series or something. It's not Great Campaigns of the American Civil War. It's the Clash of Arms one, where there are just these special interphase or special conditions, not really interphases, depending on, because in those cases, what you had were in some of the games of the series, you had turns that were 2 days, and they don't quite work the same as the 1-day turns that I think the game was designed at. That's a problematic game system because they change the scale regularly within it, and that when you're doing that, you're doing weird shit. But in this particular one, what you have is like every day is the same except, well, every 2-day period or whatever is the same, except the last couple days in that period, which are just different for some unknown reason, you know? And it's not a lot of difference. Like, I don't mind that the entrenchments and the replacement is sequenced in that way. Yeah, they technically should be filtered in across the whole time, but it's not that big a deal that there's this little interface where stuff is injected in. What is a big deal is the line continuity only being enforced on 1 turn out of every 3. It creates this unrealistic cyclic pattern in the game. It became obvious pretty quickly there just weren't enough French to be able to launch this attack without paying probably too high a price. So I'm definitely not doing it. Probably not doing any counterattacks either, but we'll see. A lot gained by the German attacks this time. A push here against the Belgians. Those were successful. I misjudged this fortress. I thought it had 2 points left, not 2 points against it. I looked at the counter, assessed it wrong. Ended up spending a little too much ammo on it. Maybe an extra, I don't know. I spent like a 30 and a 42. And you can see I'm cutting down. I've only got a couple more shots left with the big guns. And the big guns are necessary to take out these fortresses. I am, and this is historical, running out of ammo against, the early fortresses. I need to take Maubeuge. That is my path, It really, really is. It has to fall. But on the other hand, well, I'm not going to break through it, Tool. So, there's still 2 fortresses there. There's 2 at Maubeuge too, but But it's too hard to blow up. But on the other hand, you can take out those big fortresses just by attacking. None of my fortresses surrendered, however. Still, it's, I should be getting about one a turn right now until the number gets decreased. Nah, just not getting any, which kind of sucks. That's going to throw us into the interphase, and, oh, geez. I feel like I'm too tired to do the effort for loading a video tonight, but I don't know if I'll have time tomorrow. Yeah, I'll be able to get through the interface. I may end up, it's possible I'll be gaming tomorrow, although I should have heard by now, I would have thought. In which case my day becomes much, much more crowded. And it really is an effort to load the videos now. It's just my camera's so fucked up. I hate the significant delay in uploading. I can do this part. I can do it in the morning a lot easier than I can staying up late at night. It's just a mechanical task that is annoying. It'll be an annoyance if it drags into my work time, which it probably will, but not that big a one. No worse than keeping a fire going, which I haven't been doing. All right, so we handled the interphase. You can see victory points have switched over to the Entente at this point. I was hoping to mostly be able to have some sort of huge breakthrough or something. It's just not happening. Once that line is established, it's hard to push it around. Yes, I'm getting hints of these big breaks and everything, but they're just not happening. They just don't open up and gape. At the beginning of the game, there's not enough troops to cover the gap, but if the Germans don't push a little harder than I did, they're not going to make it through. I guess, well, we got another pile of these. The ever-growing pile, which is, again, going to make the attack harder because both sides become more and more capable of throwing down defenses. Additional supply marker. Actually, I've been kind of cheating with these in the sense that I thought they went down during the interphase, and I put them there, and both sides threw them. Again, in the southern region, I actually shifted things. Well, here's the thing. They don't show up until your friendly supply phase, which means each turn you can reallocate them. That makes them a lot more flexible than I thought they were. I thought they were kind of like each interphase. So, geez, man, you're going to have a supply shortage down there. You're not going to see much attack. But both sides have kind of made decisions involving this. I mean, there's just not enough troops here, but now involving the mountainous region here, that they're just not going to pursue it. The goals have been achieved there, so, well, except for this. So why make many attacks? Here's the problem. These are both big sectors of the front. If I took something like this and put a supply limitation on it, that would probably be okay too, because it's a narrow sector. And in fact, a lot of these armies don't have a lot of space. So it might make more sense for the Germans to first army. But I actually have a fair number of units that are liable to be attacking in those sectors. Here, I'm committed to this withdrawal and fill in the center where it's more important. So, we might end up devoting more effort, more space to other armies. But, I mean, eventually we're going to have to slap things down here. We keep getting these markers every damn turn as the offensive peters out. For replacement points, the French still not getting enough or not needing enough. They're now booked up to 19 replacement points. in reserve. And I did look this up, and there doesn't seem to be any limitation based on the resource chart. That's different from the Serbian game. The Serbian game had an actual limitation, I believe, where if you had more than 10, you lose them. But it also had a means of throwing march regiments on the board, which were kind of like the line of communication things and could be absorbed into regular units the same way detachments were in this game. The Germans, on the other hand, drained all of theirs, and you're still limited, but it's at 3 per, so it's a little easier to eat them up. Yeah, I mean, they drained them all by here. I didn't add any down here. And part of that's because of the initial, well, almost all of it. The difference is because of the initial attacks that the Germans made, all those intense attacks. They made a lot more of them than the French did. But also, I've popped off intense attacks here and there otherwise. Another part of it is the Germans have a large contingent of forces that are not facing the French. The Belgians get no replacements, so they're just, covering a lot of ground and not really capable of it. The Brits had to use a couple of theirs. Usually so the Brits haven't done an attack yet, I don't think. The Brits haven't done an attack that I remember. And so that means, and they certainly haven't done an intense one. So what that means is that was a trade-off, right? So the two losses that the Brits took this round, the Germans also took those 2 losses. And there are still a lot of German units that are reduced strength, so they have that. All right, this one's going up, and I guess we're ready to start game turn 16. I don't think I see any color markers there. Yeah, that's one problem with putting all the counters on the track. I don't know what the hell else you would do, though.